Why is game optimization the secret ingredient to a successful game? Well, the answer is pretty simple, really. If people can't play a game, why would they? But then the second question I have to ask is, why isn't there more focus on it? Hello and welcome, fellow virgins. It is iSuperVirgin here, and today I'd like to talk about how important optimization in games really is. So like I stated, the gaming sphere has a lot of issues when it comes to performance, even in bigger games. Some get fixed fairly quickly, right? We have day one patches, but then others take quite some time to get fixed or just never get fixed at all. Let's take a look at, for instance, Star Wars Jedi Survivor. See, like, that game got released on PC and it ran so horribly. It had abysmal performance, and it was backed by EA, right? It wasn't necessarily made by EA, but one of EA's companies made the game, and the performance was just so bad. And then, for instance, we also have The Last of Us PC remaster, which is a remaster, which means it's already had its chance to be like a fully fledged game, and it was still really bad. It was broken on top of it, but despite that, it also had very big performance issues. So we're already finding these big companies to just say, nah. Again, this is backed by like Sony in this case. There are different kinds of optimizations out there though. The one we're talking about right now is more performance-wise. So when we look at a video game, how well does it perform on a certain setup? But there is actually a different type of optimization, which is optimization for file size. A lot of games nowadays tend to be a lot bigger in file size, and that is logical to a certain degree with graphics and whatnot, but some games need to be way better optimized than what they are. I know games that just say like, hey, let's just take a whole SSD of space. Like, there are games out there that take hundreds of gigs just because they can. It's because they're just badly optimized when it comes to file size. Let's look at the new Black Ops 6, for instance. That was reported to have like 300 gigs. Like, if you go to the pre-order page, it says that you need 300 gigs to download that. Like, that's the size of the game? Like, how is that possible? We have Red Dead Redemption 2 here, right? Beautiful game. Good game, has a lot of different stuff, has a whole story mode, has a giant map, whatnot. And that game is 120 gigabytes in size. We're looking at more than double that. They have, however, of course, posted on Twitter saying that this wasn't true, that this was, I think, another Call of Duty. I think Modern Warfare 3 with it as well, and Warzone added, and additional packs, and additional this and that. How does it end up on a storefront saying it's 300 gigs? Like, this isn't the first game you're making, okay? This is the so many of the game you are making, especially with Modern Warfare 3. Like, Call of Duty releases a new game every year, and this is new. This is the first time this happens, and now they're saying that this isn't true. I guess we will have to see for when the game releases, but it's definitely going to be more than 100, maybe even close to 200. This is just a bit of damage control because it got a lot of backlash. So what I'm trying to just say here, what I'm trying to convey here, is that even the big companies, the biggest companies with years of experience behind them, have struggles trying to optimize these games for both performance and file size. Now, there is a difficulty to this, of course, because when you're looking at PC gaming, there's so many different setups that you could have, so many different CPUs, GPUs, motherboards, you know, RAM, all that it could possibly be mixed up with. And so you have to make sure that it works on so many of those different setups. This is, of course, PC gaming's problem more. When you look at a console, for instance, that is a lot easier because a PlayStation 5 or an Xbox Series S or X, well, that's a certain console, right? You can't really upgrade it next to maybe just some storage space, but when it comes to performance optimization, well, it's one setup. You can optimize it to just play well on that one thing, and then it works on every single person's PlayStation 5 or on every person's Xbox Series S or X. Like, that is how easy it is compared to PC gaming. It's probably also the reason why a lot of companies tend to stay with a certain console. But even then, when we look at the optimization of a file size, well, it does impact the gaming experience for a lot of people. Not everyone has high-end internet, and with a lot of cases like a PlayStation 5 or an Xbox, they're probably mostly connected to a Wi-Fi network. I, for instance, myself have good internet and I don't have that much problem like downloading certain games. But if a game is 300 gigs, for some people with bad internet, that could take days, like actual days to just download a game. And a lot of times those people, they have jobs, they have families, they have a lot of different things to do. They don't have time to play games for hours on end. They maybe have a few hours, maybe 1 or 2 hours a day that they can like sit back, relax and play a game. And if those hours need to be spent downloading, maybe sometimes it's an update as well, but even if it's just a new game, they're hyped to play this new game and then they have to download a bunch of stuff and it takes like a whole day just to download it because their internet isn't good. That is just really sad to see, and it can be prevented. A lot of times, like I said, with these games and with these maps, it's about how good the game looks, right? If a game is very good looking, it's gonna require a lot more space. That's why you have pixelated games that are barely a gig, and then you have other games that are 100 gigs. Like I said, Red Dead Redemption 2, beautiful game, has a lot of different things, is 120 gigs. But I think we can perfectly say, Rockstar can say why it's 120 gigs. I don't understand how Black Ops or any Call of Duty in the last 10 years could ever say that they reached that amount. Not that they're bad looking games, but when you look at, for one, the graphics, but also just what is in the game, the gameplay, it doesn't change enough to just justify a change in file size as big as that. This can, however, be done a bit too much. So, for instance, when they're building a level or when they're building certain items, the quality of the item is all with like different polygons. So for instance, when you're making a soccer ball, you wanted to just not have too many polygons, right? However, some companies do tend to have way too many polygons in well, a soccer ball may be one thing in one map, but honestly, it happens with a lot of different things in a lot of different maps. And I think that's what the Call of Duty devs are, for one, doing, and what a lot of devs are doing. They don't care about how many polygons they use. They don't care about how efficient it is. And I'll talk about why in a bit. This, of course, affects both performance and file size. Therefore, you're going to need some high-end stuff and a lot of storage space just in order to play these certain games. Like I said, not ideal. Now, there are different reasons as to why this could be the case, right? We don't know for sure because we can't really actually see source code for a lot of games, but honestly, I think mostly we're talking about unused code here is probably a very big reason why games tend to be bigger than they need to be or tend to run worse than they need to be. A game can take, like very big games can take years to complete with giant teams, and one guy can write a piece of code and then it can never be used again, but then that guy doesn't necessarily delete that code, and eventually if that happens years and years on end, and you have a company that lets its employees crunch and work like slaves and be tired and whatnot, that tends to happen a bit more. Mistakes tend to happen, and so seeing something like that, it'll slip through the cracks more easily. And so I feel like a lot of these games that had bad performance just had a lot of unused code that they needed to fix, that they needed to remove, just get rid of it or use it somewhere or whatnot. But just that stuff that wasn't needed and that just affects both file size and performance. It's the mentality of, if it works, don't try to fix it, which is honestly not the greatest mentality, because you need to optimize your game. You need to be able to have more people play your game and play it properly. Now, people tend to have a lot of problems with performance. Like any AAA game that releases nowadays, even if it has better performance, like let's say Elden Ring, still has a lot of people going into the forums and just going like, oh my god, the performance here is so bad. Oh my god, I have this performance. Oh my god, my game runs at these amount of FPS. Like, we don't know the exact specs most of the time when people do talk about this. A lot of different times they're talking as if they have a PC that's better than what NASA has at their bases. But honestly, most of the times it's just a fucking potato or no, it's a ThinkPad with a 4090 attached to it. That's what most of these people are running. And then they just expect big graphic card, good performance. That's not how the computers work, but still they're crying about this. So people are always going to be stupid. People are always going to be misinformed or give misinformation just to get the benefit and just to be able to cry and get their 15 seconds of fame. But despite that, a lot of people do have some valid claims for a lot of different games, like The Last of Us, like Star Wars Jedi Survivor, like Battlefield 2042, like so many different games that come out nowadays. But at what point is that the user's fault, and does that line, cross where it's the developer's fault, right? Where does that line stand? Where it's, well, you're running a potato, so how do you expect to perform this compared to, well, you haven't optimized your game properly, so even a high-end PC can't run this, right? Where does that line switch where we can put the blame on someone? Because that's what we love to do. Let's put a blame on someone. Let me know down in the comments below what you think. Where do we put the blame? Where do we cross this line? And while you're down there in the comments, leaving me a comment telling me how good I look, why not also subscribe to the channel for more gaming commentary just like this every Thursday and Saturday. The consumer really does care about this. That's obvious when you look at the forums. A lot of people jump onto these forums, they want to play these games, and so they care about, they don't want to spend too much money just in order to be able to play that one game. And I understand that to a certain extent, right? A broken product is bad when you have a broken game, but like if it performs poorly, that might even be like a worse experience to go through. Like that is already just, that can be even more annoying, because then you can play the game and it works, but then you need to spend more money in order to just be able to properly play it and to have a good gameplay experience. But like I stated, the big teams, they are just too big. A lot of stuff will just slip through the cracks, and then when you have to waste time optimizing, that just seems like a lot of money lost to these companies. When we look at, for instance, file size, well, I can excuse that to a certain extent, because for a company, it's logical that you would want your game to be big to a certain extent, because, well, people will download it, and that means less space for other games. So people will have to delete other games, and so they'll have to spend more time on your game. Because why would they delete a game that's 150 gigs if they know that they'll have to spend a full day downloading it, when a game that's only 10 gigs could be done in less than an hour? Well, that's just easy math at that point. Like I stated, there is never really a way to optimize a game and just keep optimizing as to, having a game like Red Dead become like 1 gig, or having it run on a potato PC and working properly. That doesn't work. We can't do that. It's optimization. It's not like you can't put it perfectly. I personally have a pretty good rig. I'd say I have like a medium to high rig, somewhere in between that line. I have an i5 8th gen, I think a 3060 Ti, 32 gigs DDR4. Like I have a pretty decent rig, and in my opinion, if I can't run your game, I'm gonna be honest with you, your game is not well optimized. If I can't run the game at 30 FPS, that game is optimized really badly. I'm looking at Gray Zone Warfare, for instance. That is a game I can barely run at 20 FPS. That is very poorly optimized, and that feels like very, I don't know how to say it otherwise than this, like it feels elitist, right? It feels like, oh, if you have a really good PC, you can play this game, but otherwise go back being a pleb. I don't know, it just feels really weird to me that you need a high-end PC in order to enjoy gaming, when a lot of games do optimize properly, and well, you can play those games properly. Because despite the whole thing that I just said about Elden Ring having performance issue, I think that took like a day or two and the performance issues were gone. I remember not being able to play that on my laptop whatsoever, but then after the performance issues were fixed, I turned that thing on my laptop and it was just perfectly fine. It ran smooth 60 FPS. Cyberpunk 2077, Star Wars Jedi Survivor, Battlefield 2042, Redfall, Forspoken. The list goes on. They have one thing or two things in common. Well, the first is they all have big studios backing them up. So they can't say that they didn't have money for this, right? Money isn't the problem. Time, however, is. These big companies do not want to spend time optimizing a video game. Like I said, they're already crunching. They want to meet this deadline. But I don't understand why this is the case. Because a lot of the times when a game releases and it has bad performance, it does worse. You know, the release window, right? When it releases, that is pretty much like the first couple of days is like the most important for a video game, because that's when all the sales come in and then they drop down. And so if the game is riddled with bad reviews because the performance is bad, people aren't going to pay for that. People aren't going to be playing that. A lot of times these game companies will also release like a day one patch. And while that is like one thing, because then of course it takes like less than 24 hours and the game's supposedly fixed. But the other times it takes like always like less than a month and the performance is good. Like, I find it so weird that they don't just delay their games with 1 month and then deliver with good performance. It's really weird how these big companies don't seem to really care, while there's an outcry among the masses, and yet every single time these companies release another big game and it runs poorly, it just happens again and again and again, right? Companies still use Denuvo even though it's been proven to have like worsened performance. And I do understand that anti-piracy part of it, but it's already been proven that it takes a couple of days even with Denuvo and the game gets pirated, which is, like I said, the most important part. So after a week, remove that stuff, get that performance up. But then with other things, I always just think, just wait like a month, release your game a bit later, and it's just completely fine. I don't understand it. Big game companies, I don't think I will ever understand. They are so anti-consumer that they will do things like this. They will do things like microtransactions. Hell, I'll keep ranting about that, but honestly, I have other videos talking about that. Go check out my back catalog. I have a few videos talking about big gaming companies. It honestly saddens me that, you know, this is happening. Like I said, big companies, I don't know. Smaller companies tend to do this a bit better. I have video games that are, of course, they're smaller, but they run really, really well. Even if the teams are small, because they get time and they get time to optimize, and they're not giant teams, so they know what code they write and they know what code the others write, and they tend to work well together. So I guess that's that, right? But what do you think? Do you also feel like this just sucks, how big game companies just do not care about us, do not care about the optimization of their video game and having more people being able to play it, because that would take more time and more money? Or do you feel like it's not that important and that you don't really care, and that Call of Duty being 300 gigs doesn't really matter to you? Well, let me know down in the comments below. And while you're down there, why not subscribe to the channel? Like I already stated before, new gaming commentary videos just like this every Thursday and Saturday. Anyhow, I hope you have a great day. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.